Abandoned in the old world by their kin, the Wood Elves are a reclusive and secretive group, preferring to remain hidden within the wooded halls of Athelloren and avoiding the outside world entirely. Led by their demigod king Orion, a powerful support as well as melee lord, they strike out into the world during the Wild Hunt, seeking to defeat their foes wherever they may hide. With an upkeep and recruitment cost reduction of minus 20% for Wild Riders, they are capable of fielding large amounts of cavalry in their armies, and their boosted leadership during forest battles ensures that the sons and daughters of Athelloren will never abandon their forest home. Unfortunately, their elite forest spirits do have an amber cost associated with them, making it difficult to field large quantities of treekin, dragons, and other such powerful units. Fortunately, their starting roster of Wild Riders, Eternal Guard, and Deepwood Scouts are all very powerful units and can take on all sorts of targets that the Wood Elves face in early game, whether those be Beastmen, Bretonnians, or the dreaded Orcs. So let us summon the Wild Hunt and strike out into the world, seeking to purge all evil in the name of Lady Ariel. Hello everybody, here we are at the southern end of Athelloren, beginning our Wood Elf campaign. So, quick disclaimer as always, everything in this tutorial is based on my experience in Very Hard and Legendary, so everything should apply to lower difficulties as well, but some things might not be as important to prioritize, cause you as much of a challenge. Also, I will not really be covering Argwelon, which is starting here in this tutorial. They will get their own video at a later point, because Argwelon plays pretty differently from Wood Elves, and I definitely think they obviously deserve their own video, much like the other sub-factions have been getting up till this point. So without further ado, I'll be going over the objectives of the Wood Elves, and then their strengths and weaknesses, and then going into actual campaign gameplay. So first and foremost, Oak of Ages needs to be leveled up to Flourishing. These are fairly unique, or they are unique campaign objectives. It's not just to capture so many settlements or whatever. We need to get the Oak of Ages Flourishing, which makes it level 5, and then eventually you need to win the battle of the defense of the Oak. And that's a battle against Beastmen, and there's a whole bunch of events that will happen as you're leveling up from tier 4 to 5 on the Oak of Ages, and I'll be covering those in the late game section of this tutorial. Now for strengths and weaknesses, in my opinion, Wood Elves are one of, if not the strongest faction in the game. And this is both true in both when you're playing as them, and also when you're playing against them, because the AI tends to eventually get pretty aggressive with them and kind of steamroller everything in their path. So definitely they have a lot of strengths, and I would definitely want to go over those initially. First and foremost, their positioning. It's very defensible. Enemy forces move fairly slowly and take attrition in the forests of Athelloren, which makes it very easy to defend. And most of the territories around you are fairly friendly. The dwarves, obviously, well, it seems that most of these are in the orange and mostly hate you. In fact, most of them will not declare war on you. And as long as you tread the line carefully, you can avoid conflict with most of your neighbors. Make sure to try to be safe with the other Wood Elves. Don't declare war on them. They'll never really cause you trouble. The dwarves and Clan Angren and Heknor should not cause you trouble, and neither should Scarsnake. Really, the only problem might be the Bretonnians. These orcs being wiped out by Angren fairly quickly. Also, the Wood Elves do have some of the best defense in the game, even though they do not get walls. These defenses work very well with their playstyle on the battlefield, their high mobility, kiting, skirmishing playstyle. And these defenses just reinforce it very effectively, giving them various buffs to ammo capacity, reload time, melee defense, and just number of units they can field in defense. Furthermore, they have very strong structures in general as far as boosting their units up, early access to powerful units, and all of their units, except for the possible exception of the Great Eagle, are very strong. So the Elves have a very powerful unit roster, with no unit really being useless or or rarely useful. They also have very strong lords. Both Durthu and Orion and Durthu are very powerful legendary lords, arguably some of the best in the game, and even the generic elf lords, both tree men and tree kin, or both tree men and the Glade Lords are very powerful. The Glade Lords deliver they give you a hybrid lord who can both shoot and go into melee on various powerful mounts, and the tree men just give you a bit of a mixed melee and lore of life spellcaster lords. So they're very powerful and very tanky. They also have powerful heroes. No melee hero in the vein of the Captain or Gorbel or Werkin, but they do get the Branch Wraith, who is a mix of a melee and spellcaster, and gets both Lore of Shadows and Lore of Life. Then they get the Way Watcher, or Waystalker, who is basically your generic assassin hero, but he is much better in combat than, say, a Witch Hunter. He has very good ranged combat characteristics. He's very accurate, very long range fire. Just a very powerful hero in general, can get Prey of Anathema. And then finally you have Spell Singers, who are a sort of spellcaster. They're just a spellcaster with Lore of Life, Lore of Shadows, and Lore of Beasts, and they're just a very powerful support tool. Then, of course, the Elves do have rather strong technology and skill trees. All their lores have very strong campaign, personal, and battle effect stats, and these should definitely be utilized to the fullest. And Elven technology is all over very powerful. None of these technologies are bad. All of them can be considered very, very strong, and it's just a question of which one do you want to prioritize first, and we'll be going over that in a little bit. Furthermore, the Elves do have a very powerful raiding and raising economy, and that is definitely where you will be getting most of your money, much like a Horde faction. They also have very good boost from the Oak of Ages if they can level it up. Eventually it will allow them to confederate, reduces upkeep, improves public order, reduces corruption, and all improves the garrison of the Oak of Ages, just ultimately making it a very strong structure. And it even improves hero recruit rank ultimately. And then they can also occupy any settlement anywhere. Granted, it is with only a tier 1 settlement, but it's still a very powerful ability to be able to settle anywhere. And the buffs you can get from those structures are very, very useful. Then they do get fast replenishment. The Elves have several skills and talents to spec into, and technologies, casualty replenishment and growth of the forest, perenniality, dedicated technology such as Aerith Kiel, the Pale Queen, and other such techs, as well as things such as Waystones can make them very, very quick to replenish their forces. And finally, they have very good global recruiting. They can ultimately recruit all their units globally within one turn, except for a handful of, with Sithrai, with the exception of a handful of high-end units such as dragons. And those are usually units you don't feel as Wood Elves anyway due to your Amber problems. So going into the problems with Wood Elves, and they have a handful of these as well. Their early game is rather weak. They don't have much of an in-home econ, even when you control all of the Athaloran. It's rather a pitiful source of income. Just though it's not bad for how few territories it is. The Wood Elves starting roster, while fairly strong units, is a bit of overkill for a lot of the factions you face early on. You will actually want to scrap many of these units, such as the Unshielded Eternal Guard, the Hawk Riders, and in many people's opinions, it's actually worth it to scrap everything and then rebuild your army from scratch. So in general, this early roster, while looking powerful on paper, is not necessarily worth keeping around. Units are you also have very expensive units. Your cheapest infantry costing 125 to upkeep and 475, I do believe, to recruit, which makes the Elves a rather challenging faction to field en masse, especially early on when you don't quite have that raiding, raising ball rolling, and don't control all of Athaloran. So that's definitely a bit of a problem. Then Amber is very restrictive. You have to. In the early game, it's very much a juggling act between investing Amber in technology, investing in leveling up your Oak of Ages, and in building up your capital. It's honestly not worth it to invest Amber in units until much later into the game, once you're well established. Then finally, they do have. They obviously can't build cities outside of Athaloran, only those outposts. Finally, what I think is probably the biggest problem is that they don't have commandments. They have very poor control. Their growth is not particularly great, but this can be made up for with technology, with Isha the Mother in particular. So that's not really an issue, but their control is terrible. On Legendary, it's -12, and they don't really have the technology and the skills and all that to undo public order penalties. You need to use either branch wraiths or invest in Lork the Trickster. Ultimately, you will want to build a craftsman's tree, and you just need to create a combination of various factors to undo your public order issues, but they are a very, very crippling problem for the Wood Elves, and you don't have commandments, so you can't counteract these with those. So really that is it for the Wood Elves' strengths and weaknesses. So going into a bit of their gameplay, first and foremost, I really think I should go over the technology, and this is a bit of a sorry, it's a bit of a support. Very important to prioritize certain techs in the early game for the Wood Elves. So first and foremost, obviously you have to research Morai Heg the Crone, and this is this provides a small ward save and some leadership during forest battles. It's really solid from a defensive standpoint. It's just not bad. It's a very solid upgrade. Nothing particularly fancy, but solid. Then I would recommend going for. There are 3 specific Amber techs you want to get fairly early into the game. The first one should be Isha the Mother, then Lork the Trickster, then Mathlin Lord of Depths, and then finally Nethu, Keeper of the Last Door. These should be your priority Amber techs. Why? Well, because Ultimately, you will be fighting against Stalia Tilia, you'll be fighting against the Bretonnians. They have a lot of ports. You abuse the heck out of those ports to build up your income. And then Nethu, Keeper of the Last Door, he will help you with your raising and settlements and your post-battle loot, which is where you rake in most of your money anyway. And finally, Isha the Mother, obviously your first one, will help you with growth in your home provinces. This is important so that you can quickly level up to higher tiers. And Look the Trickster will help undo a little bit of that public order problems, slowing down the rate at which you're getting revolts, which either helps you get armies into position, or just buys you a little more time to maneuver around and use your armies out in the field. So those are definitely the priority techs. After that, I would basically go into whatever you feel like. The rest of these are all the remaining techs are fairly good. Aerith Kiel is very nice. Ultimately, you do want to get Sithrai just to get that crazy global recruiting. So that's basically it. Now for building up your cities. Obviously, there aren't very many cities to build up for Wood Elves. Ultimately, you will want, once you control all of your settlements, you will want to be able to recruit every single type of unit. If you want to field multiple Way Watchers, multiple Spell Singers, multiple Branch Wraiths, you might want to have some redundancy and build buildings for those units in multiple settlements. But otherwise, I would not invest in more than one building for things such as dragons or warhawks or archers, infantry, any of those. I wouldn't invest in more than one structure for them if you don't plan to field multiple heroes that come from those structures. Make sure to have fortifications in every settlement or in every one of your cities. And make sure to have income buildings. You will want grapevines, and once you have more than one Elven province under control, not counting Oak of Ages. Once you control Craghalls Falls and or Argolon, once you control those, that is the stage at which you. Oh, wait a second, my bad. That is the stage at which you will want to build up Vinter's barrel houses, and these will help boost your economy even further, your home-based economy. And of course, you'll probably want a Sculptor's Cavern everywhere, and then fill in the rest with these technological buildings or openings for the or structures that create openings on your council or your Elven Councils. You'll want to build those up in various cities. Now, going on from there, how to build the King's Glade specifically and into the early game. Now, for offices, I'll quickly cover those. Elves, much like Empire, get offices. These are unlocked through unique, those unique structures we went over. Similarly, some of their technologies are locked behind structures. If you want, you can build the structures and then destroy them once you begin researching a technology. I would not really do it because some of those structures provide decent bonuses anyway, so I like keeping them up. The extra campaign movement range for the Temple of Kurnus, for example, I think is pretty nifty. But you can just build it once to get this tech unlocked and then scrap it and never have to not have to have that building again. But when building up King's Glade, do keep in mind, for new armies, you need to have Elven Lords to occupy these positions. Tree men cannot occupy Elven Council positions with the exception of Durthu. So most of your generals or leaders will be Elven Lords and not tree men. Especially if you want to fill these spots, and some like the Warden of Wildwood, and as you'll see in the later game situation, and the Trickster's Mask are very solid, because Trickster's Mask is the position that allows you to trade with non-Elven factions, and Warden of Wildwood greatly improves public order and allows you to have a leader who can really stiffen up his your control of your home-based territories. So without further ado, going into early game. So first and foremost, I would take your Waystalker and march him out into Bretonnia, and what you want to do with him is attempt assassinations, just begin to harassing. Now technically, you can try to become friends with everybody, become friends with Bretonnia, but normally this will become a problem because you won't have the income, you're going to be very stagnant, and you're not going to be getting enough amber to build up your cities, to build up your technology, to build up the oak. You need to get amber somewhere. Fighting dwarves is rather difficult and frustrating as elves early on. You don't want to fight the other elves, so that only really leaves one option locally, and that's Bretonnia. Durthu does have a cheese option where he goes all the way into Norska, and I do believe that's still somewhat viable, even now with Norska changes. But you can't do that as elves because your armies do take attrition in Norscan territory. So you need to go strike out at Carcassonne. So start harassing him with the Waystalker, just be a pain in the rear, be a nuisance. And in the meantime, at home base, you want to build up grapevines. Slowly but surely, tech up. You will want to build up to tier 2, level up your to Trickster's Gallery so you can get some War Dancers, and make sure to get the technology building, the Azrai Forge, to get Eternal Guard with shields. You may be thinking get a Glade Guard hide. It's not necessary. You get Glade Guard just from your main building, and they're a very solid unit to begin with for archers. They're probably one of the best archer units or skirmish units in the game, as is. And simply put, you don't really need to field better archers. Honestly, when if you decide to scrap your expensive units in the early game, like Way Watchers and Deepwood Scouts, you can get by perfectly without them. So what you want to do is you want to scrap as many units. You want to scrap the Hawk Riders because they are taking up a slot of Amber. Scrap the Eternal Guard without shields because you need shields. That's very important. They greatly enhance your survivability as Wood Elves. And yeah, but get the technology structure for Azrai Forge, and then the 4th slot you can leave as a bit of a toss-up between Guard Platform, between Roots of Giran, and then Regiran, and then a Craftsman's Tree, in my opinion. Once you hit Tier 2 with your main structure, and then for Tier 3, I'd fill in Roots of Giran or Guard Platform. Get the whichever one you didn't take prior. Get a Craftsman's Tree, and most likely get start getting a Glade Guard hide. Ultimately, you will want to tech everything up in your local city, but for now, these should do. In the meantime, once you've reached roughly, once you've gotten a lot of money, you want to keep farming money and just sit tight. Don't do anything fancy. Just sit around. You can park Orion if you want in King's Glade to try to counteract a little bit of that on public order. Once you've saved enough money, build up quickly. Build up enough archers so that you have 4 archers. Addition 6 total archers, Way Watchers, Deepwood Scouts, and then 4 Glade Guard, or otherwise 6 Glade Guard if you scrap these guys. About 2 to 4 War Dancers, because these will be your shock troops, and then the rest Eternal Guard, leaving a spot open for your Waystalker. Then you strike out into Carcassonne, besiege it. This will be a bit of a rough battle. You will definitely need to use your micro. You will definitely need to use your. You definitely want to build siege towers. Definitely use bombardments that Orion has on cooldown. Orion's a very strong lord himself. If you can assassinate the Fan Enchantress or any heroes she has backing her up with your Waystalker, that's even better. Use siege towers. Load the War Dancers up into the siege towers. They will allow you to create a breach on the walls that your Eternal Guard can then exploit and just kind of storm all over. Eternal Guard is more than a match for most Bretonnian infantry. And War Dancers will absolutely tear through Bretonnian infantry. The only really challenging units here will be the Trebuchets and the Grail Guardians. And for that, you need to utilize Orion and your archers to the fullest. And Eternal Guard will do okay against Grail Guardians as well. So really, that's the most important thing in the early games: dealing with Carcassonne. This is really the only option, and I'll go on to that. This is basically, especially on Legendary, this is kind of one of your only options. Otherwise, you will end up sitting, and you might just end up trapped in King's Glade, never quite able to build up while all your opponents build up. Once you've taken Carcassonne, you can build up. You can strike out towards Brionne. Take Brionne, that will eradicate Carcassonne. I would recommend building a Waystone in Carcassonne initially, so that you have that garrison to reinforce you. Raise settlements. This is important with Wood Elves. If settlement makes you more than say 5k for raising, raise it. Once it's raised, occupy it immediately, unless there's a nearby army, in which case you might want to hold off on that. Because occupying it does drop your unit count incredibly, by a huge amount. Usually occupying will cost you about 1,000, sorry, to 2,500 gold. So that is why you want to be making a decent amount of income from the raise. If it's a very weak settlement, say 1,300 or something gold from the raise, which sometimes happens in the early game settlements, don't bother raising it. It's not worth it. Just seed it immediately. Early game techs you want to invest, or skills you want to invest into are casualty replenishment rate and Wonders of the Forest. Keep in mind that your melee and ranged skills are mutually exclusive. You have to invest in one or the other. And it's also pretty solid. It's a solid option to invest in some of your Lord's personal skills. But once again, this is something I really think is best left up to the player. You can't really go wrong no matter which you decide to go with. Personally, I like to go with melee because I like to run a lot of War Dancers. But you can't go wrong with running a lot of archers. You can't go wrong with investing in your lords. There's some very powerful abilities here, such as Tempered Rigor, which increases melee defense and melee attack by a massive amount, and sorts of skills like that. So definitely be on the lookout for those. As well, definitely some things I would invest in is Orion as a Surion's Command, which improves missile damage for all forces faction-wide. Once you've taken Carcassonne, you can strike out from there. Take Astalia is my recommendation. Leave Bretonnia alone for a little bit. Take Astalia. That'll give you several ports and kind of secure your south flank. Do leave a half stack. You will most likely need to have revolts, especially on Legendary. There will be a lot of revolts in Kingsglade. You will need to leave about a quarter. If you build fortifications, about a quarter stack. If you didn't build fortifications, probably about a half stack to defend Kingsglade. Elven revolts are very, very dangerous. You need to be ready for them. They get very powerful, like tier 3, 4 units, such as Waystalkers and Shrieking, all those sorts of lots of War Dancers. They're very, very dangerous. So you need to have a decent stack ready to defend against them. Push south, take Astalia. Leave about a half stack in Bilbali, ready to defend against Beastmen. Beastmen will be poking around, so you can just kill them off whenever they show up. And just leave a half stack there, ready to deflect Tilia if it decides to invade you, or otherwise deal with these Beastmen. Keep in mind, Elven units are very powerful. They're probably they trade very cost efficiently, or very efficiently with enemies. So generally, with the backing of a garrison, you can take a 15 stack of Elves can take on a 20 stack of practically any opponent, except maybe the massive Chaos armies of late game. Unless you run some sort of very weak stack. And you can honestly get by with just tier 1 units for Wood Elves, between Glade Guard with Starfires, Hagbanes, and Eternal Guard with Shields. Once you've taken Astalia, you move north, and this should be, at this point, a bit of a sweeping advance. If you're not able to afford defenses initially for Bilbali or for Astalia, don't necessarily worry about that, and just leave it. And Beastmen, if they do take it, they'll just raise it. So that way you can just push north and start crushing Bretonnia. And ultimately, this, if you can play off Bordello against Bretonnia and Musion, those three factions against each other, you can often exploit it to very, very good effect for yourself. Because they will often be fighting each other. You should have about a half stack here, or a quarter stack defending Kingslade, depending on what your fortification situation is. Half stack in Bilbali, and 1 to 1.5 stacks pushing into Bretonnia and slowly erasing and occupying all the territories here. Once you've taken Bretonnia, at this stage you should be able to level up your Oak of Ages to tier 3, confederate the other world factions, and this is where you become an absolute powerhouse. Scrap any buildings you don't need, any buildings that are redundant and you don't want them. Build up all your remaining tech structures that you haven't built up to this point. Scrap any units you don't want to be fielding, because you will get massive, very powerful 20 stacks of units. And at this point, you are a powerhouse. You can start stomping your way all across the world. You can crush the dwarves, you can crush the Tilians, and you can crush chaos, and you can basically do this all at the same time. So I'll be going into a bit of a late game situation just to discuss some of the late game nuances of playing Wood Elves, and we will, we'll go from there. So here we are in a bit of a late game situation, and I just want to discuss some of the late game issues and things to deal with Wood Elves, and just discuss a few things. So first and foremost, something I forgot to mention. The items, especially the Cloak of Isha, or the unique legendary items, are very strong, and I would definitely recommend getting them on your Elf Lords, or on Orion. And the Sword of Daith on Blurthu is very strong, so they're well worth the effort, I think, to go after if you are so inclined. They're not a useless legendary item. As far as compositions go for Wood Elves, now if you want to go for a safe composition, my recommendation would be something like this, except maxed out. A front line of Eternal Guard, backed by some War Dancers or Wild Riders, or to flank, backed by a handful of Archers, maybe a mix of Starfire Shafts and Deepwood Scouts or White Watchers, and some War Dancers with Spears to flex against Cavalry, and some Wildwood Rangers just to dish out some damage on the front line. So basically, it was armies sort of like this one. I'll look around and see if I have an army exactly like that somewhere around. I tend to build armies more for kicks. For example, this is a very elite army, but this is something you can also do. The Wood Elves have a lot of money. And here we go. This is a perfect example of an army. With flanking War Dancers, Eternal Guard with Shields. War Dancers are very, very quick on their feet, 53 speed. Eternal Guard with Shields, and some Glade Guard. Of course, you don't want to have too many Treemen Lords, because they cannot take the Elven spots, except for Durthu. They can't take the spots on the Elven Council. You can also build some silly builds like this with the War Dancers and the just mass War Dancers and Weight Watchers, or even all cavalry builds, because I like to do all cavalry sometimes. Just have fun with, test my micro out, have fun with that. So you have a lot of options. Wood Elves can have a lot of functional builds, but if you're looking for a very solid all-over build, that the one demonstrated up above with the War Dancers and the Eternal Guard is a solid choice, I think. So going onward. Of course, make sure to use your heroes, make sure to use your Waystalkers if you have multiples of them, to assassinate and kind of roam around and gank enemy heroes, which of course are rampaging about with chaos. Your expansion after you take Bretonnia is basically just eastward. You'll have a whole bunch of armies for free from dealing with from confederating, and you can start just shifting eastward. Crush the dwarves, crush the humans, crush everything, crush the orcs, beat chaos. Now, Chaos isn't a priority for Elves because it's fairly out of the way. It takes them a while to get down to you, though they eventually will. And if you're going to fight them, a very optimal position for the Elves to fight from is ambush. They can actually enter ambush stance, and in some areas, they can, with the proper followers and build, they can actually get 100% ambush stance in some areas. Here it's 90%, which is still huge. Elves with their archers and war dancers are very well suited for ambushes. So that is definitely something you want to abuse the heck out of and use to stall the chaos. It's actually fairly hard to get lightning strike for the wood elves. It's the snapping branch, and that's at the end of the bottom line, so it's not necessarily something you're going to have much access to. So that's something to keep in mind. Try to keep going over outposts. The outposts at the front line, in my opinion, should have waystones on them. This will help your casualty replenishment, and it will help your garrisons if you're fighting around this area. There's a bit of a cheese strat with waystones, where if you just have the basic garrison, or even if you have the full garrison, but especially with the basic garrison, you can simply deploy your troops in vanguard deployment, because these are vanguard troops, and hide them. And the AI will not find them, because the AI will pretend or try to look for you, and it will just not be able to find them. And if you just wait out the 20-minute timer, if you set it to 20 minutes, the AI won't be able to find you, and you can just win that way. But this is very tedious. I don't really make much use of it because it takes too much time, in my opinion. But you just auto-resolve and lose the place. Sometimes the AI will waste time sacking your outposts, but it is a strat you can do if you just want to hold out for a long time. Make sure to build up harbors. Combined with Mathlin, Lord of the Depths, they're very strong, especially in Norska. If you get the technology Estriath, Lord of Hunger, then up in Norska you can control the harbors and get massive amounts of income, because Norska just has so many harbors. Your harbors will actually rake in more cash than the Norskan harbors do. So poor Norskans getting beaten by the Elves even in their own turf. And yeah, now for the final quest, for obviously against Chaos, you want to bring a lot of armor piercing, but Elves have a lot of armor piercing to begin with. Much of their force is armor piercing. Some Wild Riders are not a bad idea because they cause fear, and so much of Chaos is susceptible to fear. And the rest of it backed by a mix of War Dancers with spears, Wildwood Rangers, Eternal Guard, and either Glade Guard with Starfire shafts, or Way Watchers. Just a very solid comp in my opinion. Some options for the structures you can build. If you're not building waystones for your forward deployment, I would suggest either building foraging groves or sacrificial grounds. Here in this game, I built a lot of foraging groves to improve my income, but you don't necessarily have to do that. You can do sacrificial grounds, which improves missile damage and weapon strength of all forces, and this stacks, so you can ultimately get like 50%, 100% bonuses if you have enough of these built. And that can make the Elves absolutely brutal. It is a bit cheesy, but it definitely makes the Elves a very brutal opponent, and it's one of the things that can make them so powerful in late game. Now, the final thing to touch on before just doing final thoughts is the Beastmen, the final quest. It will occur here in Val's Anvil. I've already beaten it with the army from Orion. Between tier 4 and as you're leveling from tier 4 to 5, Beastmen will continuously spawn around here in this area and march south, or march, I guess, east into the towards the Oak of Ages, trying to besiege it and attack it. And this will be a constant stream of armies. They're not the strongest of armies. Easily fight them off with one or two armies of your own, but just be aware of this and be ready to deflect them. Then there will be one final quest, and this is basically several waves of beastmen coming in, led by the various beastmen lords, and and you should be able to do this with as long as you're fairly high-end army, perhaps even without a high-end one. I actually did it with Orion's army here, which was a horde of war dancers and Wildwood Rangers and a handful of skirmish units. But you can do other builds if you want, and certainly the conventional build I described with Eternal Guard, War Dancers, Wild Riders, and Archers can do the trick just as well. Bringing heroes is also a solid way to do it, especially if you bring leveled up Way Watchers, because you can kind of snipe your opponents from afar. You can kind of see what my recommended build here is for the Way Watchers as well, with massive missile damage, huge investment, that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's definitely my recommendation. And that's basically how you build a Wood Elf campaign. It's pretty straightforward and really snowballs a lot once you've confederated all of Athelloren. It's just the early game that's a huge challenge. You'll always want to leave one lord, preferably with public order upgrades of some sort. So Wildwood Warden, wait, it's not diplomacy. While preferably the Warden of the Wildwood, it will, until you're dealt with chaos and all that, and your chaos corruption is worn off, you will want to keep him around in the Wildwood and just undoing or trying to keep up public order. Of course, you can also build Sculptor's Caverns everywhere, and that will help too. So in short, Wood Elves, build up an army of Eternal Guard, War Dancers, and Glade Guard. If you're very confident, you can just do Eternal Guard and Glade Guard. Strike with shields, of course. Eternal Guard with shields. Strike out, take Carcassonne, take Brionne, swing south, take Astalia, get your harbor technology. and Mathematical Lord of the Depths. And then swing back north, take all of Bretonnia, and once you control all of Bretonnia, fortify your home base and Vestalia with about one half stack. Once you take all of Bretonnia, you should be able to confederate all the Wood Elves, and from there you can just strike out into the world, crushing dwarves, crushing empire, crushing everything in your path, and just kill them all. One of the cool things is with Norska and vampires and whatnot is the Street Lord of Hunger, so immunity to attrition can help a lot and allows you to go places no one else really can. And this definitely allows the Wood Elves to actually make more money than Norska does in there with their harbors, on top of, or make massive use out of Norska. So that's basically it, I think, for Wood Elves. Yeah, I went over compositions, we went over beating the final quest, and yeah, that's it. I do hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you found it useful and the advice solid. If you have any questions, if you have any recommendations for any, or if any advice you think I missed, be sure to mention those down in the comments. If you have any further questions, any comments, criticism, I'll be sure to respond as soon as I can. I'll be doing an Argolon campaign fairly shortly. I'll also be continuing my gameplay of Wulfric's campaign and Sanctus Reach. Yeah, that's basically the state of the channel, I guess, for now. As usual, guys, I appreciate you all for watching. I do hope you found this guide helpful, and Wyvern out.